Hey everyone, Chaps here, and today is part 2 of the assembly of our Prusa Mk4 Kit. Last time we assembled the frame, but today we're moving on to the X-axis and the X-Carriage. As usual, I've got timestamps down below if you want to skip around, and I've also got links to the other parts of the video series and a longer video showing the full process down below. I've also got links to the official online assembly manual below as well. With the frame fully assembled, we can now hop into the X-axis. We begin by getting the X-end idler and the motor mount. These have a ton of nuts that need to be inserted. By this point, you're hopefully pretty used to the various techniques to use to insert them. Now let's get out some bearings and their clips. The bearings in this kit need to be lubricated, so there's an included tube and some adapters. Here we're going to use the larger black adapter. It screws onto the tube, is pushed into the bearing, and rotated into position so that it pushes lube out of some tiny channels onto the ball bearings. It seems to work okay, but it's not really the most elegant process. I feel like this is something that could probably be improved in the process later. After doing this for both bearings, we look at clipping them into place. We place it in the motor mount and rotate it so that the ball rows are aligned properly, and then a rubber pad is put in this cover to help the bearing from rotating. The lid is then slid over the bearing and tightened down. As usual, it's tightened in a diagonal pattern. This process is then repeated for the X-idler mount. We put the bearing in place, get it oriented properly, slide the lid over, and we tighten it down with the X pattern. Next up, we take the 2 longest steel rods and 3 of the shorter bearings. These get marked to help us remember the orientation of the ball bearings. Then, basically just as with the previous bearings, they get lubed up, this time using the smaller orange adapter. We can then push the 2 rods into the X-end idler. It takes a bit of force, but pushing on the table worked out pretty well. The bearings are then slide into place, but make sure you note the direction and orientation, like you put 2 bearings on one side and 1 bearing on the other. And with those on, we can slide the X motor mount onto the other side of the rods. For now, the X-axis can get set aside and we move to the X-carriage. Again, we have a ton of nuts that need to get embedded in this one. Just use the Allen key with various push and pull methods to get them in place. And after that, we'll add a few hex spacers as well. The carriage clip is next and receives a few rubber pads. Just as with the other pads we use, these will help hold the bearings in the right orientation. With those pushed down into place, we'll spin the bearings so that they're lined up properly, and we'll put the cover on to tighten the screws. Next, we grab the X-axis motor. This gets mounted to the motor mount, similarly to the Y motor. Use the Allen key to align the pulley, and then tighten down the grub screw. From here, we get the idler pulley and the X belt. With the bolt wrapped around the pulley, we can pull the pulley into the idler and slide and push a pin through it. Man, I said pull and pulley a lot there. By pulling on this belt, the pin seats into place. Now we'll push one end of the belt into the carriage. I like to use an Allen key to get it fully seated in there. The other end gets passed through the carriage, wrapped around the drive pulley, and then back to the carriage. It can then be pushed into place. Don't worry about the tension right now. It should be somewhat tight, but it gets fully tightened later. The last step for this X-axis is to fully tighten the carriage clip into place. And bam, the X-axis and carriage are complete. That took about an hour and 45 minutes, bringing us to a total of 3 hours and 25 minutes. With the X-axis wrapped up, it's time for another short break. In the next video, we'll take a look at the Z-axis, and as always, I've got links to the other videos down below. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment down below or hit me up on Twitter. If you found this helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you in the next one.